Tonight, Dr. Mahalingam, through his unique perspective of having 12 different jobs, explains that precarity undermines dignity in the workplace and harms the well-being of workers. In order to restore dignity in the workplace, he argues we must recognize, intervene, preserve, and cherish the very core of what makes us human. He is here tonight to talk about precarity, dignity, and well-being. He will talk for the first part, and then you'll have to
And thanks, Padraja and Kevin for organizing the event. Thanks for coming on a Thursday evening after all the classes and everything. You know, a lot of interesting things you can do on Thursday night, because in Michigan, none of the students want to come to class on Friday, so we always think the weekend start by Thursday afternoon. So nice to see you all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly walk you through my work on precarity and how it is related to dignity and why it matters to us, right? So, so okay, I want to start with the story. I haven't told this story in a very long time. Story of the postman from my town. So his name is Srinivasan. He was a mailman. He delivered all the mails, starting with my high school grade sheet, my admission to college, admission to engineering, my admission to US, coming here. All these things. He knew everybody in my family. He came to all our functions. We went to all his family functions. In a way, he was part of our family, part of our community. There's a sense of connection to him. And he knew everybody in the street. He knew when I got rejected for a job offer, everything he knows, right? So he always delivered all the letters. So we have a personal connection. Now, India is going through okay. Now we have the gig economy time. So we have delivery by couriers, and they don't know who we are. They text us, they find out who we are, and if you don't pick up the phone within first ring, they'll just go the next day. So we don't have any connection to the sense of community we have. So it's a precarious job, and precarity leads to disconnection to our community. So we have a very fast service. They guarantee that all the ads in India, you can say fastest courier service in India, but none of us know who is delivering. We don't have any connection to the person. So precarity in the 21st century, that's what I want to talk about today. So it's not just social class, it's not about being jobless or being in a temporary job, or your job status, or being marginalized, or being vulnerable, or having unstable living conditions. So all these things are important. They're part of being precarious, holding precarious job. And I can talk about precarity in the academic setting. People who didn't have tenure, who are all in the tenure track, feel precarious till you get your job permanent. For example, when you got tenure at Michigan, usually the Board of Regents signed this in the final Board of Regents meeting, prove our tenure decision. So I was out of town. I told my daughter to keep all my mails. So the University of Michigan sent a letter saying, oh, you got tenure now. That's the only documentation you get from that. But my daughter looked at this mail, she thought it was a junk mail. So she put the mail in the junk pile. So I came back from my trip and I looked at the letters. She said, these are all junk mail from the university. I opened the letter, it says, welcome to the community, University of Michigan. That means until I got tenure, I was not a member of the community. So when your job is precarious, you are not part of the community, which is a problem. So when I talk about precarity, the way I conceptualize it, it's a multi-layered concept. It is situated. It's also spatially organized, socially imposed, culturally mediated, and it's also embodied. So different intersections of race, class, gender, sexuality, your religion, immigration, all the refugee status, all those things together shape how we think about precarity. So precarity also has multi-dimensions. Economic precarity. People who don't have a regular job, they have to do jobs to really make a living. Spatial precarity, depending on the school district, what schools you are going to, right? So the spatial disparity also lead to a precarious condition, and where you are living determines what kind of schooling, what kind of community you're part of, right? That affects you. Social precarity, the way you are included or excluded, like myself, when I was not part of the university community until I got my tenure. So this is social exclusion in that sense. And cultural precarity in India, most of the cleaning is done by Dalits who are treated as untouchables for a long time. So culture also sanctions certain ways of thinking about social good. Then you embody all these things, how it affects you as a person. That's what I call the phenomenological precarity. So all those things are important. When your life is precarious, you're vulnerable, you also feel not belonging, and there are consequences for it. There are social consequences, there's also psychological consequences. Okay. So when you have proliferation of precarity, there are several ways it affects us. Number one is invisibility. You become invisible. So you're not part of a community, that means you're invisible. And there is lack of recognition. So until you become part of the community, your work, your contribution to the community is not recognized. Then you're disconnected, like the mailman. Sorry, so we don't know who is delivering my mail now because everything is outsourced. Indian Postal Service is outsourcing everything. So we don't have a connection to our mailman. And the normalization of suffering. When you are marginalized, your suffering is not invisible. It's invisible. That means people don't pay attention to this. They don't even take your suffering seriously. You are completely oblivious. Leads to injuries. It also affects your psychological and physical well-being and meaning in life. So all those things are all connected, interconnected. So precarity affects in many ways in workplace. So I've been studying precarity in workplace, precarious working conditions. I study janitors. I study people who do cleaning. I used to be a janitor too. One of the jobs I didn't put the list because I've done so many jobs. Most of them were precarious jobs because I was moving from one job to another job. And I actually know what being invisible means. So I was a grad student when I was a cleaner, janitor in the cafeteria. I used to clean all these places like this. So the fellow Indians don't even make eye contact with you while you're working because your job status is low. That means you're invisible. They don't pay attention. They don't talk to you during the time. So your invisibility also affects you. Invisibility has a very serious way to affect your health, how people think about you. And in all our work, I study janitors in India, US, South Korea, Japan, France, in all these countries. In all our interviews, these are the three themes came up. All the janitors, there are a lot of variation how cultures shape your janitorial work. Lack of appreciation, people don't pay attention to you, right? So in Michigan, they don't make eye contact to the janitors. A lot of times students don't pay attention to them. And when you enter a room, people don't say hi, or if you say good morning, people don't respond. So this is a very common, probably one of the most three common themes came from all our interviews in all these 5 seconds. So this is this really shows invisibility also has a particular way of how your presence is not recognized by the community. So your work is not recognized. And it's also normalized disrespect. So the cartoon says, I call this emergency meeting to discuss the lack of respect I've been getting around here lately, but nobody was in the room at the time. So when you don't recognize somebody's humanity and suffering, they become unbelievable subjects. That means you don't really think of them as worthy of our attention or worthy of our compassion. So that leads to the invisibility also affects what kind of institutional practices we can change to minimize the suffering. So unless you recognize the suffering, you are not going to change anything to improve their lives. So we also study, Patraja is here, so we also studied Indian janitors. We have done 2 major projects with them, looking at them. Indian janitors all come from a Dalit caste group, and 95% of them come from this caste group. So what they do is they're often mistreated, there's not even a record of how they are mistreated, even during an emergency time when they were working to stay in the city during a flood, 2015 flood. One of our field study was 2015 flood, right? So the suffering of the janitors is rarely covered by the mainstream media. But if you Google 2015 Chennai flood, you'll see a lot of news coverage about how the middle class really came together and come as a community and help each other, which is all true. We are not denying that. Most of the supply chain management research looked at how we have to help them during the flood, how to distribute food and medicine. But the big problem started after everything ended. So we have to clean the city. That's where the janitors brought to work from the different parts of the state. And they were mistreated. Few of them died during the cleaning of the city. And the dignity injuries of the Dalit janitors have been not really discussed in any serious way. The janitor death in India is one of the major concerns now. There's a major movement, Dalit Lives Matter. The movement is going on right now, looking at how to bring attention to the death of all the janitors in work. So at least on average, we lose about 40 to 50 people for a year all over India who die in work. Right? This is one of the highest risk occupational hazard in India. So the numbers are all, even everybody is looking at the numbers. So one of the things what we are looking at is when you are not respected in the workplace, you're suffering, you're risk-taking, nothing is noticed. There is no institutional concern about this and how to improve that. So when your work is precarious, you're also not noticed. And increasingly more and more janitorial jobs are given to temporary workers. They are also outsourced. They are already in a precarious working condition because of the economic conditions. Then the work itself is having a lot of precarious working conditions. So the compounding all these two variables affecting their lives and their suffering in very unimaginable way. And it's also a huge movement right now to raise awareness about Dalit janitors working in India. So when I talk about dignity, and that's what I want to focus today's talk, I talk about three kinds of dignity, the way I conceptualize it. Personal dignity, intersubjective dignity, and the process of dignity. So I'll walk it through in a bit what it is, each of them. So okay. The process of dignity really talks about the dignity culture, how people are treated in a workplace. When you walk to a place, people are happy to come to work. You feel empowered when you come to a place. It's a compassionate place. There's also a lot of institutional support to promote dignity in what you do and dignity at work. Not only your job is valued, it's also the kind of work you do is valued at work, right? So you can actually build skills, you become more qualified, more opportunities for your professional development. All those things are all part of what I call the dignity culture. That's going to help you to promote a culture of dignity at work. So a workplace that is more built on trust and respect, where there's also a lot of openness and solidarity and empowerment of workers. So you can actually see a good leader within the leadership literature. You can think of a servant leadership as a good model. A servant leader is the one who is also care about the workers, who really care about their workers' well-being more than the institution well-being itself. So in a way, you can think of a servant leader who really promote a dignity culture in workplace. So you can also think of dignity as a very general idea. So to have a general definition of dignity is an embodied practice. If I ask my students, how do you define dignity? Usually there is a lot of silence. I ask them, what do you mean by dignity? Students take a lot of time thinking about this. So they think about human rights, they think about dignity in a hospital setting, things like that. But if I ask them, oh, think of a situation where your dignity is violated, when you felt your dignity was violated, then there are a lot of hands raised. They all talk about this happened to me this time, this happened to me this time. So dignity is something you are going to notice when there is a violation of it, more likely than when you are given this, when you gain the dignity. It's really an important part when you actually notice more when there is lack of dignity. So that really affects you interesting way. So dignity injuries are an important topic right now in workplace. So I really think of dignity as a way you interact with the world. Whenever people don't recognize your humanity, you felt let down. And that affects how you think about who you are, your self-esteem, self-worth, so on and so forth. So the personal dignity part where you think about your self-worth, you also express yourself. It's also unique to you. It has the ethnic quality. It's also about acceptance, who you are. So when you have personal dignity, psychologists spend more time talking about self-esteem, which is what we study often. But personal dignity is mostly a sociological construct, has a very strong psychological component to it, where you think of your identity and your dignity as part of who you are. It's expressive, it's very unique to you. Whenever there is a violation of it, then you feel how it is affecting you, like personal dignity. The intersubjective dignity is about the recognition of interconnectedness. The more you feel like you are connected to other people, you also work towards preserving the dignity of other people in your organization. All these three concepts are interrelated in that way. So you can actually talk about common humanity of people, and you also recognize the uniqueness of the other people. So whenever people recognize you, who you are, all the workplace literature, when you feel very satisfied in the workplace, when you're happy to come to work, all of them has the idea of dignity component. Intersubjective dignity is very strong in those situations, right? Any questions you have before I proceed? The basics of dignity. Anybody have any questions? Okay. So what we did was we actually looked at how the dignity is related to precarity. The question is, personal dignity, is it really improving mental health? So we found, we already tested this. Most of the dignity research in the US focus on dignity injuries, but we don't have any workplace data. So I went to France, working with the collaborator, labor economist there. We have a national data set, 20,000 sample size, 20,000. We have film directors to janitors to domestic work, a huge sample, where we operationalize precarity, how you feel precarious in your workplace, and your personal dignity and mental health. What we found was the personal dignity is very high, very positively related to mental health. You feel good about yourself, and it's also negatively related to precarity. More precarious working condition, it affects your personal dignity, it also affects your mental health. It's fully mediated. So we are just finishing the paper now. So we also found the same pattern for intersubjective dignity and processual dignity. We didn't find any group difference. For all groups, it mattered, whether you are a film director or you are a janitor or domestic health. All those things, all the three relations were very important to us. So we also found they're all related to other well-being measures, family well-being, meaning at work, work satisfaction, low levels of absenteeism. The more dignity at workplace, you're also less likely to miss work, which is very important. It affects economists care about that a lot. Absenteeism is an important measure. So we actually tested the same relationship in all these variables. We found the same relationship across the board. Intersubjective dignity is slightly more important for women. The significant difference between them was, but the relationship is still good, but the effect is much stronger for women. So we also studied qualitative study healthcare, mistreatment healthcare settings. We also looked at cervical cancer patients, how they are treated in the hospital, health clinics in China. We also looked at birth experience of women in hospitals. We published all of them. I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about the birth experience women's hospital. So what we did was we asked women who gave birth in the hospital how their experience. So we didn't ask them about dignity. We actually quoted the data, their qualitative responses, how they experienced it. So there's a lot of dignity injuries they experienced. They talked about it, and it also affected them how they're going to go to the hospital. These are the general patterns they talked about it. Insensitivity, the healthcare provider, nurse sometimes, doctor sometimes, even the person who is admitting you to the hospital. Then there is also identity stigma. Suppose you go there with a tattoo and people mistreat you because they assume you are a drug dealer or you are a gang member. Gaslighting. So you say, oh, I'm in pain. But the doctor will say, honey, I know you are, no, you're not in pain. So they're actually giving them this, right? Infantilization, which is another common theme. Whenever there's a dignity injury, they'll say, no, you're just, you don't know it, just really, you are just, we know better than you. Poor communication and ignore, people are ignored, the invisibility part, the suffering. So all these things affect women's experience in the hospital. Many women in the interview said they're not planning to go back to the hospital unless there is emergency, they're not going back to the hospital. So in a way, dignity injuries has a lot of, is a mechanism to think about healthcare disparities, especially ethnic minorities and people who come from working class backgrounds. So we found that very striking. So we are continuing to do a research major project on this dignity injuries in healthcare today. So these are the general conditions. Jacobson did a study in the hospital setting. So what she found was dignity violation happens when people are vulnerable. Suppose whenever you go to the hospital, first thing you notice is you take off your clothes. You're vulnerable. Right? You're vulnerable. There's also, if people are very, they don't explain to you. Even if you're taking 10 minutes to explain what the procedure is going to be, that makes a huge difference. It really improves their locus of control. They really have a sense of agency, which is a significant predictor of well-being. So when they don't do that, it's also the circumstances are harsh, people are busy, then out of inequality, depending on where you come from. If you come from working class background, the doctor doesn't even address you directly. They talk to your daughter who looks like educated. So they don't even make eye contact with the patient. We're trying to improve the sensitivity of interaction in the hospital setting, at least in Michigan. In the Michigan hospital, they're working on a project on that. So these are the conditions under which dignity violation happens. When you are vulnerable, there's the antipathy towards you, and dignity violation happens when there is an asymmetric relationship between you and care provider. So these things are happening. So we try to how to improve these things. What are things we can do? So we have been trying to look at these questions, how we can actually promote dignity. So the question is, for a long time we've been talking about dignity violations. Yes, these are all very troubling, but what can we do about it? We can do a lot of things. So you can actually foster a culture of respect and towards success and failure, right? So one of the things people talk about is you should not be afraid of failing. But students are always worried about failing, right? You are already, your parents are failing, paying a lot of money to go to school. So failure is a very important part. How to think about failure is an important part of promoting dignity. Recognize partial successes. So whatever progress you made, how the organizations can recognize that. So only the winner take all kind of a situation also do not promote dignity, which is a problem. Then there is also a notion of vulnerable generosity. It's called Jinpa in Tibetan Buddhism. I study mindfulness. I'll talk a little bit later. So Jinpa is the term being vulnerable. That means you are ready to receive feedback. When you're vulnerable. If you don't know something, you can always say, I don't know this. Can you guys help me? So that means I'm open to receive information or feedback from you or learn from you. So all these things are important to really promote dignity. The more you are open, that means your subordinates are going to trust you more. All the group processes will suggest that too. Then you make sure that who is invisible, right? For example, based on our work at the University of Michigan, we're also working with student organizations to help talk about these issues and a lot of awareness about how to recognize, how to foster community for janitors. There are different initiatives by different groups. We are learning about all those things in the campus. So it's pretty impressive how we can make some conscious effort to really make certain things which are invisible, how to make it visible. Just say hello to I tell my students, the one thing you learn from your class is when you see a janitor next time, say hello to them. Just talk to them as you are interacting with people. So that will be at that level. So that could be very helpful to really promote dignity. So we can also dignity promote at the collective level. So recognition, that's what we need to think about. Recognition is a very significant part of making to counter precarious working conditions. Talk about presence, leveling, make sure we talk to people who are actually not in the same status as you are, advocacy for them, being an advocate for people who are disenfranchised, empowerment, courtesy, love, and solidarity. So all these things will promote at the collective level more dignity in place, whether it's hospital setting or any organization setting you can think of, or higher education. So these are the conditions under which dignity promotion happens. Solidarity, question of confidence, compassion is an important term. So be more compassionate in the workplace, also promote dignity in the workplace. More humane circumstances and a commitment for justice. All these things promote dignity. So in the workplace, that means it's going to improve well-being of workers and the bosses, of course. So all those things are important. So once we think about dignity as a very important organizational intervention or a commitment to really cultivate dignity practices in and around your organization is important. I teach a course on mindfulness. As part of the final project, my students actually design an organization that is mindful, that promotes dignity. They really re-envision an organization that is, they call it a mindful organization. It's utopian in some level, but it's also important for you to reimagine how to teach of an organization that is committed to dignity and promotes dignity in all levels of the organization. So at the individual level, what we can do, very simple thing. So many people forget, they don't use the word please or kind or compassion when they write to our staff. I always tell, so all our staff do the work for you. But when you write to the staff member asking for a override or anything, make sure that you just say please or thank you. These things are important. At a micro level, these practices are extremely important. Everybody can do that. And we can actually say thanks more. In the email, sometimes I get email from students, there is no please, no thanks, nothing. But it's worse for a staff member to receive that because they're invisible most of the time, but the only thing they get is the email. So I tell students, make sure that you use a lot of these things consciously, intentionally when you write email. And notice also it's important for you to notice when you are blaming yourself. We also notice from the personal dignity, the more perfectionist you are, you're also going to score low on personal dignity. When you're highly perfectionist, you're going to be hard on yourself, and that's going to hurt you, and it's going to affect your performance and health. So in a way, we are also cultivating a compassion for yourself is important, and also have a compassion for other people whom you're interacting with. So at the individual level, other things you can do is you can have a mindful mindset. I'll walk you through this. And you also rejoice. This is something you need to feel happy for other people's happiness. This is the important part. And you need to develop a personal vision for dignity. Right? So what dignity means to us is very abstract. My students do a lot of painting. They actually paint. They do paint for all kind of different ways. They contemplatively explore what it means to them. Then they come up with a plan how to operationalize that in their own life. Make sure that you have a commitment so that you can continue to fight and grieve for the losses so that you can relate to people. So it really, when the more you foster dignity in the workplace, it's also deeply strengthen your commitment and connection to people. You know, the connectedness is very high once you have high dignity in the workplace. People feel part of the community and people feel the same. So these are the 7 features of a mindful mindset I've been researching and teaching. There are 7 features. If you look at mindfulness, people talk about compassion, which is very important. Anybody know what sympathetic joy is? Please don't Google. What is compassion, by the way, before I go? Anybody know what compassion is, or how do you define compassion? Yes.
Just like showing that you care.
You care. So when you do that, actually, that's correct. When you actually do that, what triggers that action that you are going to show that you care? Anybody else? When you become compassionate or you want to show compassion.
Something sad happens.
Yes, when there is a suffering, somebody is going through pain, your friend is not doing well, you ask, how are you doing, right? So the compassion is always your response to pain around you. The sympathetic joy is the kind of a twin sister of compassion, which is how do you respond to something good happen to your friend? If something good happens to your friend, do you really respond positively to that? What's the immediate reaction to you from you? Is it happiness right away? My best friend got into Harvard. But he got tenure at Harvard. My feeling is, oh my God, why am I studying Michigan? Right? Little jealousy, right? Jealousy is the counterpoint to the sympathetic joy. So you cannot feel happiness. In fact, people who score high on compassion doesn't score high on sympathetic joy. If I'm programming a computer, a robot, you take perspective taking, so it can do equally well. It can be compassionate to suffering and feeling sympathetic joy towards happiness. But people have to really cultivate this. So sympathetic joy is a very conscious cultivation of happiness. How to feel happy from other people's happiness, which is the most difficult thing to do. Only 3 groups of people are scored high on sympathetic joy. Can you think of category of people who will be very high on, who can rejoice for happiness? Who can rejoice with your happiness? Can you think of any category of people?
Parents.
Oh my goodness, correct. Parents, of course. Parents is number 1. Number 2.
Janitors.
Janitors?
No, I'm kidding. The marginalized people.
Not really. Do they? Coaches. Coaches, because they genuinely feel happy for you. They are more happy than their own children performing well. Third group is an interesting group, chefs. Cooks are very happy when they actually feel the people who are eating the food happiness. So we consciously work in my course on mindfulness, how to be happy for other people's happiness. This is the term in Buddhist psychology called mudita. This is very unique to this. Nobody else, no other language has the term except English. So it's a very interesting concept. So we consciously cultivate this. Then you also cultivate an awareness of how your identities are changing all the time. That means you can feel connected, right? So you don't have to fixate on one identity you have. The fourth one is called negative favorability. That is, we all have to be perfection. So whenever imperfection, the immediate reaction for us is not to deal with it, suppress it, right? Just to open it up, how to accept your own shortcomings. Or if you're an actor, you're going to audition for a role. Let's say you're going to audition for Robin Hood. It's always fun, right? Robin Hood is good. He's robbing from the rich, helping the poor. You go feel happy to go and audition for the role. But if at the same time you're going to audition for Dahmer, the role of Dahmer, or a serial killer, that's not tough. Why? Why it is tough to audition for a role like that?
Do you have to be like a little psycho?
That's sort of true. What else? Why it is difficult to do that? So
You have to get rid of like human nature.
you have to get it out of your own role, try to understand them from their point of view. So you need to have very deep empathy for the role. Otherwise, you can do a comic version of that, like a B-movie version of that, which is not good. That's why Marlon Brando is a great actor, Robert De Niro is a great actor, because they can actually bring some humanity, some negative roles, right? That's really the point. Then you have cultural humility, how to connect to people who are different from us, how to learn from you. So what I can learn from you. If you're a student, you're teaching me. An idea of wonder, how you actually see something larger than life, how to connect to larger than life things in your life. Also, how to pay attention to things that are surprising to you. Right? I wonder why my female colleagues make less money than me. That means I need to do something about it and become a share of the party. So the wonder also leads to transformation. Then generosity, of course. Generous people are important in your life. So I text my students every day for 3 weeks to notice all the generosities around that. They have a very fine-tuned version of that. Then they learn about how many generous acts they can witness every day. So that really makes them feel more connected to the community, that also finds the dignity in the long run. So all these 7 features together is what I call the more like your Swiss Army knife for mindfulness. You can open it and use it whenever you want, wherever you want. So I hope all this discussion about precarity and how to use dignity to counter precarity or promote dignity in workplaces. Our goal is to form a beloved community, what America calls a community in which people of different backgrounds recognize that we are all interconnected and that our individual well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. Basically, our interconnectedness to realize our lives are interconnected. So we can actually look at the humanity of other people. So people, especially in precarious working conditions, we have to make the extra effort to make it. We need more work towards that, to feel the dignity, to really assure the dignity in whatever way we can, and minimize the dignity of injuries around our life. So I also want to thank all my students. They're all in different universities and faculty members now, including my collaborators, Patraja, and other collaborators, who's doing work from France with me. So all these people have helped me to really develop this program of research over the years. I want to thank them deeply, and I also thank the students who come here on a Thursday evening listening to me about janitors and dignity. It's not the most sexiest topic in the world. Thank you for coming.
Everyone, so now we're going to move to the Q&A portion of our event. So we'll be moderating the Zoom chat, and if you guys have any questions, you can just raise your hand. But first, I think Anthony's going to start with the questions to start us out.
Well, Dr. Mellon, Mahalingam. So before coming to this public lecture tonight, I got the opportunity to briefly scan over your journal, all the articles from 2018 that you've written along with another author from San Francisco State University titled they really don't want to see us how cleaners experience invisible dirty work. And the article talks about visibility among like cleaners and designers. And in the article, the reader probably quotes that part from the article. So in the article you quoted, our findings also show how invisibility reflects and may reinforce power dynamics in organizations and broader society. And also added the quote, people with greater class privilege, socioeconomic power, and organizational status render workers invisible by designing people, co-workers and customers, people to work along and oversight separated from co-workers and customers. So my question to you, Dr. Mahalingam, is based on your research over the years, have there been any organizational strategies or policies in the US or other countries around the world to help remediate this issue of invisibility that employees experience in different organizations?
Thank you. I don't remember the paper at all now. It's about 3 years ago we published it. That was Veronika's paper, Veronika's dissertation. So that was the first invisibility paper we published based on our work at the janitors University of Michigan. Thank you for reading it. Even my grad students don't read the paper nowadays. It's 3 years old. What we did was we actually shown how certain invisibilities exist in the organization. What are the organizational practices? So sometimes something can be as simple as say you walk into grocery store now, you see this best employee of the month. That's an important recognition. These things are all very new. Last 10 years, only last 10 years they implemented these things. Those are institutional practices. For example, in our department, we rotate the best secretary on the floor. Every month we have a recognition for them. So we actually foster a dignity culture like this. So several institutions are doing these things, right? Food organizations in Michigan give an award to a staff member who made a difference in their life. Usually, janitors and cafeteria workers do the award, not faculty members do the award. So, so those things are important. So we really think there are changes, and we really is an important concept. People care about it, organization care about it. Hope we have to work at the sectional level and at the micro level, and so change may be smaller, but they're important.
Now we're going to turn questions over to the audience, and we'll bring you the microphone if you raise your hand so you can ask your question. Does anybody have any questions? Start.
So you use the employee of the month in grocery stores as an example. What would you say to any sort of leader, like either managerial or like president, who claims that they just want to streamline efficiency and they don't need to recognize workers because that may seem fruitless in developing more action within their employees?
I think the whole efficiency question has been a big question. That's a justification for a lot of outsourcing too. My collaborators shown in France, outsourcing janitorial work is costing more for the organization than hiring them as full-time employees. So I think it's we need to convince the employer that you need to change your mindset. Just don't see just bottom line alone as an important part. I think the well-being of the organization. For example, in the higher education, there's a new initiative called Okanagan Charter. Okanagan Charter is started in the University of British Columbia, 2017, if I remember right, I could be wrong. That really make a commitment that universities are not only places of learning, it's also promote well-being of students and staff and faculty members. How to promote that? And University of Michigan adopted it last year. We adopted the charter. We are going to commit to really promote well-being. So I'm one of the committee members who wrote the report how to promote well-being of students. There's an unprecedented amount of mental health issues, and students are suffering a lot during COVID and post-COVID. Unfortunately, the new president is the one who adopted it, but British Columbia is becoming the president for us this year. So we have a lot of new initiatives like this. So we really think about holistically, not just bottom line. So companies are also paying attention. So there's a lot of effort, a lot of mindfulness interventions in our organizations are very big on this now. Positive organizational psychology looks at these questions more seriously and how to integrate this in institutional practices. So there is some progress we're making. Is it enough? I don't think so. We need to work much harder at structural level questions we need to address, like the one you raised. Is it actually only at the bottom line all the time? What is the total cost of that for an organization? I think those sort of questions are important questions now. So organizations, scholars are looking at this. So dignity is a good way to ethically anchor these thoughts. That's what I'm trying to do.
So we have a question from Dean. Well, so the next question is from Lee, a professor from the Pittsburgh College as well. So the question is, thank you for visiting this college and giving a very informative presentation. In your work, how do you measure precarity? I'm also curious about the concept of intersubjective indignity and wonder if you could speak more about how that is defined and measured.
Good question. We use the secondary data analysis, so I don't have all the details right now with me. So we have the labor data. We have the existing measures, but precarity, how people feel insecure in the place, what are the experiences in the workplace. So it's all kind of predetermined variables we have to create. We have to use it to create a composite measure of precarity. For intersubjectivity, looking at how people think of you, group processes, how the manager treats you, the flexibility with which you can organize yourself, all those, your work schedule, all those things are important. I think that's how we operationalize it, because we didn't use a scale. We actually used existing data set. We created a measure from that, which is, so that the concept is valid for how we get access.
I'm good, I can talk. So what do you think about, if we're talking about precarious jobs, workers in precarious jobs, oftentimes those are also low income jobs. How much progress do you think can be made towards dealing with the idea of precarity simply in these kind of interpersonal interactions without addressing the systemic injustices of poverty wages?
Absolutely. I think that's what the unions play a very important role. So union membership is a very important protective factor for this 40 class occupation. So yeah, without addressing the structural issues, minimum wages, all those things are important. Without doing this, just doing the cultural practice, changing that is like putting a band-aid on the issue, not changing that. So I think we have to work at both ends. That is important. The reason I was trying to focus a little bit on the psychological side is to really think of at individual what we can do, while also trying to really improve the structural issues and how we can change the system.
Any other questions?
Sure.
So kind of on the topic of outsourcing labor, how do you think that we in a society that has so often begun to outsource, and particularly like the fast fashion industry, how do we give dignity to workers that we can't see and that our society doesn't really seem fit to change the situation up?
It's a good question. I actually found students are very active in this. Each campus has investment, during party time, where the investments are. They were students protesting in the 80s. Now students are also looking at the supply chain. Who is actually delivering it? What end? So the company is becoming more conscious about it because it becomes a value signaling problem for him. Because in this company is doing, for example, Michigan. I didn't realize for our school, our tomato budget per year is about a couple of $1 million. The amount of tomatoes we buy for our, for the cooking in the university. So the one student group work with who is producing the tomatoes? What is supply chain end? Is there a modern slavery there? Right. So they really work all the way with the degree at the end of the supply chain. The students put a lot of pressure, and there's a university committee looking at this, what the ethical practices. So these are all important interventions. So student initiated. So I think those sort of a good example for us to think about how to make companies more accountable. And every company is worried if something, they are all, organically, not only organic, now they also say sustainably harvested, so on and so forth. I think those value systems will become more elaborate in the coming years, and younger generation is very active in raising those concerns. I'm very optimistic.
I was just curious, as someone who has done janitorial work in the past, how that experience has affected your perspective doing this sort of research.
Well, it gives me some way to relate to them, but at the same time, I shouldn't claim that mine was a very temporary. I know I'm not going to do the janitorial job forever in my life. That was really very different. Whereas these people are actually doing the work. That is their job. So in a way, I can empathize with them, but I have to have a lot of humility when I interact with them. And that's a very different way they are embodying their identity compared to what I did. But I could understand the everydayness of what it means to do that in a campus, when I was a janitor. So those things will be very helpful to really talk to them. But at the same time, now I am talking to them as a professor. That's a very different positionality I have. In fact, in my paper, we talk about it. We actually mentioned our own positionality, how it affects, what is our motivation, how we can actually, our goal is to really find practices so that we can, in the spirit of solidarity. That's how we did the research. That's how we think about this project. But also, I'm very, I want to don't overstate. I don't want to overstate my own work because it was a time. I know it's going to be a finite time. Then I'm going to do my PhD. No, I'm actually in a grad school, things like that. So, which is very different from people who do the work. But I also now see people do more jobs. They're doing 2 different jobs. They're also doing house cleaning. They're also full-time employee in the university. These things are all troubling developments. We put a lot of pressure on their life and their health. So those things, that's what the precarity is very important for us. We should think about precarity more seriously and take it. We're also editing a specialist on precarity. For organizational studies journal, it's going to come up in the end of the next year. So we are excited about that. But it's a lot of new ideas how to put this question into people.
Other questions?
Yes.
You have studied about janitors in 5 countries. So presence of trade union, does it really makes a difference? Either when it comes to dignity injury or dignity. And do you see any difference in terms of how these people are treated in different countries?
Well, that should be a separate talk. So I'm going to quickly summarize. So I give us some general themes. This is the invisibility part, as the course you saw. Each country has a very different way the janitor work is organized. US is pretty integrated. It's about 50% white, and the 50% is all ethnic minorities. So it's a very diverse workforce. When they're unionized, a lot more protection for them. That's for sure. Across the board, that's the main effect if you think about it. In India, caste plays a role. But the problem with unions in India is all the unions in India are tied to political parties. So each political party has a union. So janitor, if you are a janitor, you belong to a party, then you actually likely to join that union. And that is tied to that party's political position. Whereas in the US, the unions may have a sympathy for a political party, but they are an independent organization. They are not controlled by the political party. So there's a very different way the union work is organized, affecting the lives in janitors. In South Korea, most of the janitors do the work in the university setting of women, village women, about 50 to 70%. There's all women janitors union there. And so it's a really very different way women's union work, and they organize around this their life, and they got a lot of important victories for them, getting regular pay, and all this negotiation is important. The major strike in 2000 and Seoul National University that led to this major change. The union, how union negotiate for the janitors. France, of course, is much more liberal. The unions are very strong, but they're also outsourcing a lot of work. This is the problem. It's what we are studying. In Japan, unions are strong, but Japan also very strong. Unions are very strong in educating the public about their work. For example, janitors go to schools and teach them, bring the track and show them how it works, what are the things they do. So not everything ends once you flush the toilet. So what happens actually after you flush the toilet? So students actually learn about it more. In that sense, there is a particular public awareness about the work. In the schools, also students are supposed to do it. There is a particular way they relate to that. So each of these countries have a very different way of structuring their lives. So janitors, but a lot of them, people feel like they're seen as a low status job. The dignity is low, right? Even in France, you look at the dignity scores for all the career job-wise. So of course, professors and teachers score very high on dignity, and domestic workers and janitors, they have a lower dignity workers. So there is a particular way it is also organized by by your occupation hierarchy. So that also very simple. What else? Did that answer your question?
All right, we have time for one more short question if anyone wants to ask a final question. All right, well, I have one. As college students, obviously, we're all graduating soon, going into the workforce. How would you say we handle being in precarious job positions?
So precarity has been very normalized. I think we need to challenge the narrative. It looks like 2 jobs are important. Everybody thinks 2 jobs is a good thing. I think United here come up with a campaign, 1 job is enough, something like that. So we should have something like that. I think your generation should have, my generation has, your generation should also have that luxury of having 1 job and make a living. So I think by alerting precarity, I'm just wanting to challenge the narrative that you need to have more than 1 job. It's your choice, that's okay. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. For example, in Japan, some of the janitors we interviewed said, oh, I'm going to work for 5 years as a janitor, I'm going to move on to something else. So they have a very clear plan. So they really see the transition to something else. That's a different scenario. Right? So I hope your generation challenge the precarity and challenge the narrative, the normalization of the narrative, which is important. I hope you all do that. And that's what my only request. Anything you take from this, don't take it for granted, challenge it, push it. Thank you.
Thank you.